Stalked on Sunday. It was the year 1990, and I was a carefree 15-year-old girl at the time, living in a sleepy but rapidly growing suburb on the outskirts of Brisbane, Australia. I would often commute to and from my friends' homes and catch up in the city via train. After reaching my station, I would then need to walk about 3 kilometers through a bustling industrial estate before reaching our small dairy farm. This day was no different from all the others. I was returning home after spending the weekend at my best friend's house. When the train reached the station, I made my way to the doors to exit. As I passed a very tall man with very long legs sitting next to the doors, I accidentally tripped over his feet. Now, like most teenage girls, I giggled and gave a feeble sorry, feeling embarrassed about my fumble in front of the train passengers. I was relieved when the doors opened, and I was able to hurriedly make my way towards home. As I walked away from the train station and into the industrial estate, I noticed everything was unusually quiet. Normally, I would make my way home on a Saturday when the road would be busy with traffic and at least some of the factories and car yards would be open, but this was a Sunday in 1990. The road was quiet and everything was shut. I didn't think much of it, but decided to keep my head down and get home as quickly as possible. I walked about 50 meters along the road and further into the factory area, when for a totally inexplicable reason, my stomach turned and I stopped dead in my tracks. I just knew something wasn't right. I immediately felt compelled to look into my closed car yard across the road. It was like an invisible force guided me to really look. To my horror, there crouched amongst the cars and facing towards me was the tall man I tripped over in the train. I suddenly felt terrified and very vulnerable. Here I was in a deserted industrial estate on an all too quiet road being stalked by a very tall predator. Even in my 15-year-old mind, my survival instincts immediately kicked in. I pretended I didn't see him and started to make my way back towards the station as calmly and as quickly as possible, as though I realized I'd forgotten something. I didn't look back, but kept my ears peeled for fast approaching footsteps on the gravel beside the road. I knew this guy could very easily catch up to me because he was very tall and his legs were very long. To add to my terror, when I finally made it back to the station, it was very quiet. Due to being a Sunday, there wasn't even a ticket master. As quickly as possible, I made my way to a public phone located in a small open park in front of the station. We didn't have mobile phones in 1990. I desperately tried not to run. I didn't want him to know I noticed him and panic. I didn't want the stalking to escalate into chase mode. I had to keep my head. As I frantically dialed home, I kept one eye on the closed public library next to the station, as that was the direction from which he most likely would come from. I wasn't even sure my parents were home, as they were very social and often went out for lunch with friends after church on a Sunday. To my tremendous relief, Dad picked up the phone. After only a couple of rings, I blurted out, "Dad, I'm being followed! I'm at the phone in front of the station. Come and get me now!" Before Dad had a chance to respond, the tall stranger came purposefully walking around the corner of the library, straight towards me. I gave up trying not to run. I ran with all I had in me for McDonald's, about 500 meters down the all-too-quiet road. As I ran, I expected hands to grab me by the shoulders at any moment. The odd car would drive by, and I was tempted to just jump in front of one, but I just kept running, never looking back. I didn't want to slow myself down even by a millisecond. It was such an amazing feeling to finally run under those golden arches. I knew I was now safe. Breathless and shaken, I ran into the restaurant and blurted out to the staff that a tall, skinny man was following me. They let me use the phone, but it was no use. Mom and Dad had obviously already left. I wasn't so worried about the stranger anymore. I was more worried that my parents would be frantic when they arrived at the phone box and I wasn't there. I waited with the staff for about 5 minutes when, sure enough, the tall, skinny man appeared on the road, out the front of the restaurant. He intently looked towards the restaurant at first, but when he saw several pairs of eyes intently looking back, he immediately turned his back and acted like he was waiting for someone. I told the staff that I had to get away to where my parents would be looking for me. They directed me out the back, and I took a back way back towards the station so he could not see me. They said they would keep an eye on him, and if he started heading back towards the station, a couple of them would follow him. Looking back, why one of them just didn't escort me back, I'm not sure. I guess they still had burgers to cook. Once again, I sprinted back towards the station, not daring to look back. In this distance, I could see my bewildered parents standing at the public phone with the receiver still dangling. I start screaming for them, terrified. They get back in the car before noticing I was coming. I'll never forget the immediate relief in their bodies when they saw me coming. We embraced and cried. Even my mom, who never cries. Understandably, I was never allowed to make my way home on foot ever again. So tall, creepy stranger who was lurking amongst the cars, let's not meet again. Visitor on a Sunday. So my girlfriend suggested I should share this story with you. I moved to a new apartment with my friend. It's more a rural part of Germany, really silent, and mostly every day went by in peace. We rarely get visitors. Only the parents of my friend sometimes check on us. So on one Sunday our doorbell rang. It took me some time to realize that there was actually someone on the door. First I checked my clock, 8 a.m. I only knew the parents of my friend being so crazy, visiting us so early in the morning. It rang again. I crawled out of my bed, stumbled to the door. I was sure that the parents of my friend were welcoming me with buns at the door, so I opened. Suddenly there was this guy. Thin hair, big goggle eyes, pale dry lips. He stared at me so intensely I was getting nervous. His skin was soaked with sweat, and he seemed to be in a hurry. We stared at each other in silence. His breath was heavy and he was clenching his fists. At once I came to my senses. I must close the door, otherwise he would beat me up. My thoughts were running, but somehow my body didn't react. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't, just stared intensely. I finally recovered my voice. "Wrong door!" and I slammed the door. Restless, I walked to the kitchen just to go back to our door. I checked the door viewer, but the guy had left. After that, I was wide awake. My flatmate overslept everything. In the afternoon, her parents were dropping by for a visit. They called us because, all of a sudden, our doorbell didn't work anymore. Easter Sunday Ferry Stalkers. This past Easter, my dad, a pilot for a cargo shipping company, was in town and offered to take me across the inlet for a nice dinner, as his co-pilots were away from their families. They were also invited to join and gladly did. While I waited for them to validate their tickets in the ferry terminal, I spotted an unlikely duo standing by the door. Two guys late 20s at most, one large and oafish, the other shorter and movie star gorgeous. I looked just in time to see Oaf nod in my direction, and movie star make a face that can only be described as, meh, I fuck her after a few beers. They stood close to us in the terminal, and I told my dad about the nod. He laughed and continued to talk into his co-pilots next to us. Every time I looked, movie star was already looking at me. I shook my head. We sat on opposite ends of the ferry, Oaf and movie star debarking before us. I was glad they were gone. We walked up the street from the terminal to the restaurant, and when I turned back to take in the view of the city across the water, was surprised to find the duo had somehow ended up behind us, and were slowly walking up the street. I didn't think too much on it. It was a busy area and lots of pubs were around. I did think about it more when they walked by the restaurant, peering intently into the front window, where we were standing waiting for a table. They smiled, exchanged words with each other, and kept moving. I let a sigh of relief until they walked back by. From the opposite direction, they stopped. They leaned on a bike rack in front of the restaurant for a few minutes and then left. Movie star stared over his shoulder the whole time. Over dinner, I informed my dad and his co-pilots of the events that transpired without them even realizing. They laughed about it, and eventually had me laughing about it too. We never see the pair of guys again. 3 hours later, as we waited for the return ferry, I was talking to our company, recounting a story from earlier at dinner, when I spotted the two guys over my dad's shoulder. One of the guys was looking my way. Scratch that. Staring. I quickly informed the guys. They were shocked and kept looking back at the pair. There was a miniature showdown in the ferry terminal as each party stared each other down from opposite ends. I ended up getting a 3-man escort home that night. If you're out there, Jensen Ackles and Shrek lookalikes, let's not meet again. See you next Sunday. Hi all, first time poster in the subreddit. But I've been lurking for a while and decided to post something up to contribute. I don't have any particularly creepy or scary encounters myself, but my mother told me this story that happened to her when she was growing up, when I was a teenager, now 26. So it has been a while since I've heard the exact details, but I can recall the basis of the main story. My mom was born in the late 1940s, and she was growing up in the Pocono Mountains regions in Pennsylvania. I cannot recall what specific age she was at the time, but definitely less than 10 years old. If you've ever been to that area, even now in current times, it's pretty remote and desolate in some places. Apparently, there's a ditch that her and her friend used to play in near a forest, across the street from my grandparents' house. One day they were playing near the ditch, and a pickup truck pulled up from the road. A man yelled out his window at them, "Do you girls want some ice cream?" Now back then, I do not believe there were these campaigns for not talking to strangers, so obviously my mom and her friend decided it would be a great idea to get some ice cream. They got in his car and he pulled away. So turns out the random man actually does take them to get ice cream. He goes inside to get the ice cream and leaves my mom and her friend in the car. While sitting in the car, my mom notices a shotgun in his car on the floor. For some reason, specifically, her first thought after seeing the gun was that the man was going to take them out into a field and shoot them. The man came back soon and gave them their ice cream. The man actually ended up driving them right back to where he picked them up from. As they got out of the truck, he yelled, "See you next Sunday," and took off. Turns out my mom would find out later that the same man the very next week was arrested for trying to direct traffic naked. My mom had told me even in her young age, her instincts immediately told her that this guy was not right, even before she saw the gun. Don't really have too many specifics, but I always thought it was a fairly creepy encounter. Jeffrey. Hi everyone. I'm just getting right to the story. I was working at a skating rink back in 2013 and I absolutely loved it. Working behind the snack bar was pretty easy, and I usually made good tips. After about a year of working there, I became accustomed to random dads hitting on me, creepy teenagers staring at me, and the like. Even when I was hosting a child's 6th birthday party, the dads would make sexual comments or make me the butt of their dirty jokes. Whatever. You women get used to that kind of thing after a while, you know? Fast forward to summer 2014, I just turned 18 years old and was excited to start being considered an adult. I was working one of the school functions when this older man walks up to the snack bar window. "Damn, did you know you're gorgeous?" he said. Please not now. I have 50 slices of pizza in my hand and a million little brats to keep from falling over. "Oh, thank you, I appreciate it," I smiled back. I'm not sure why, but I just can't seem to act well under pressure. Especially when it's involving another person. I hate feeling awkward or uncomfortable when I'm talking to someone. I always try to be polite and well-mannered because that's just how I was raised. "What's your number? I have to have your number. What is it?" He was so pushy and excited I already felt uncomfortable. I just kind of looked back at him, then all around me. I just smiled and didn't say anything, hoping he'd just walk away when I didn't seem interested. "Come on, you just give me your number. What do you think I am? I'm just being friendly. I'm just paying you a compliment. Blah blah, yeah, right. You know when someone is just trying to make themselves look like a victim to make you feel guilty? That's the way he was acting. After like 4 minutes of me politely declining his offer and refusing to give my number, I broke down and just gave it to him. I figured I could always just ignore the messages like any other loser guy who squeezed my personal information out of me. That same night, around 2 a.m., I get a text from a random number. It read, "Hey yo, this is Jeffrey." Read, 2:04 a.m. "You remember me from Skate City?" Read, 2:06 a.m. "Hit me up, I'd love to take you out." Read, 2:15 a.m. I just ignored every message he sent, still hoping he'd take the hint that a 5 to 18-year-old would not be interested in a 35-year-old father. But he continued to send me annoying texts every single day. Some were about how he'd treat me better than any man has. Sometimes they were about how I was stuck up and owed him a response since I gave him my number. Like he somehow forgot he had forced it out of me in the first place. This went on for a couple weeks. Every few days I get like six texts in a row. And then I would be silent for a couple days. I wasn't too worried about Jeffrey. I'd only seen him the one time at work. Everything else was text and that's it. Until one night, I'd been working a closing shift at work. The typical closing shift was 4 to 11 p.m., but Sundays were family dinner, where everyone working that night sat down and ate pizza together. So the time is reaching close to 10:30 p.m., and I've been expecting my friend Aaron to come in to help me finish up my deep cleaning list. My phone rang, and it was a number I hadn't saved. I'm usually too lazy to save numbers in my phone, especially when I don't talk to someone too often, so I picked up the call right away, thinking it was my coworker. "Hello?" I answered. "Hey, where are you at?" a voice said casually. "I'm at work closing. Are you here? I'm done vacuuming. I need help," I said, thinking Aaron was running late on me. "Oh, I see. I gotcha," the voice said back. Now, after a few seconds on the phone and hearing the voice a couple of times, I started feeling uneasy. My stomach flipped and I just felt a little odd. It didn't sound like Aaron anymore. "Aaron?" I said, too scared to really say much else. "This isn't Aaron. You remember me." Fuck, I stood still. I didn't know what to say. I look at my phone and notice the number looks similar to Jeffrey's, the one I had been ignoring from before. "Is this Jeffrey?" I asked, trying to sound normal. Yeah, it is. I have a couple questions for you." I was silent. "How come you think you're too good for me? How old are you? Who the fuck do you think you are here, bitch?" Still silent. I said, "How fucking old are you?" "I'm 16. I lied about my age, thinking being underage would scare him away. "Oh yeah? What year were you born in?" Fuck. I couldn't even move, let alone figure out my fake birth year. I just started, for a couple seconds. Before he cut me off, "That's what I thought. How old are you, really?" I panicked, then hung up. I felt like my heart was gonna pop out of my fucking chest. The whole thing just made me feel uneasy. A few minutes later, I get another call. I don't answer it. He leaves a voicemail, and I'm debating myself on whether I should listen to it now or later. I decide to do it right then. "Your last day never feels like your last day." End message. Right away, I start freaking out. I mean, to me, it sounds like this guy is gonna fucking kill me. I go to call my dad, and boom, phone goes dead. Now I'm really losing my shit. Jeffrey only knows a few things about me at this point. I work at a skate rink. I'm closing tonight. I'm not really 16. The worst scenarios are running through my head as I'm trying to get a hold of my dad. Finally, he picks up and agrees to take me home. We decide to leave my car there just in case. My dad said if someone were to be waiting for me, they could watch me get into my car and follow me home. When he pulls up to the building, I run to the passenger door and immediately I hop in. Now, being an employee, I'm sure a lot of you have the employee parking. Well, ours was around the corner of the building, next to an empty wooded area and a little stream, so it's very dark at night due to lack of lighting. As we pull out of the parking lot, my dad and I both look towards my car. Up against the building wall is a tall, dark-clothed guy just adjacent of my car. I start freaking out and my dad calls the cops, explaining everything that happened. Luckily, our friend Wes is a cop, and he happened to be one of the cars that pulled up to the scene. We just kept driving home hoping the cops would take care of it and my car would be safe. We got home that night and I plugged in my phone. A text came from Jeffrey's number. "I'll have to wait then." The next day, Wes calls my dad. He said that the man he talked to was named Jeffrey. He said that they went up and talked to him, saying there was a call for suspicious behavior. He told them that he was waiting for his girlfriend. Wes told Jeffrey that he was aware that he was harassing me and that was my car he was lingering in front of. He asked Jeffrey about the voicemail and told him that the PD could consider it a threat. Jeffrey said something like, "That's just my motto," or some dumb shit like that. Wes told Jeffrey that contacting me in any way would be considered harassment and that he would be taken to jail if he tried to see or speak with me in any form. I never heard from Jeffrey again after that. But I'm not complaining. Literally saved by the church. I was about 6 or 7 years old and was running errands with my mother. One errand was at our church, which doubled as a community center during the week. It was only supposed to take about 5 or 10 minutes and I was tired, so my mother left me in the car in the parking lot. Immediately after, my mom went inside. A car pulled into the parking lot, and despite the lot being nearly empty, the car parked almost next to mine. A man got out, and instead of walking into the church, he looked right at me. I was watching him from the window. He walked up to the car and stared into the window at me. I was a very shy child, and had the stranger danger talk from my parents, my church, and McGruff, the crime dog, so I had become nervous just seeing him walk my way. And when he cupped his hands around his eyes to look into the car at me, I became very frightened. I scooted over to the other side of the car, and he just kept looking at me the whole time. I still remember that look. I knew no adult should show that much interest in a non-related child. He didn't even try to speak to me, he just stared at me. Now, at this point, it could be said that maybe he's a creep, but right after I moved to the other side of the car, he went and tried to open the car door. Now, my mother isn't a fool, and the car was locked and alarmed, so the moment he tugged on the door handle, the alarm started blaring, and I swear little old me kicked into fight or flight. Like some secret ninja instincts took over, and I unlocked my side of the door opposite from him, jumped out and ran screaming into the church. Did not look back to see if he was following me, did not pass go, did not collect $200. I ran like the devil himself was after me. I ran right into that church and down the entrance hall screeching like an extra in an Exorcist movie, and smacked right into my Sunday school teacher and proceeded to snotty cry all over her. Needless to say, the guy and his car were gone by the time we went out to look. A week later, they put cameras up in the parking lot. Thinking back on this over the years, I think it is possible he saw us while we were running errands and followed us to the church. I don't remember there being any police follow-up, but this was pre-9/11, so the fact that he didn't even come close to succeeding due to the locked door may have been enough reason for my mom to just let it drop. The Titty Man and me at 16. To preface this, I'm a 35-year-old woman, and I worked at 3 different answering services from the age 16 through my mid-20s. I hope this is okay here. It involved me just over 20 years ago, the Titty Man, bondsman, and sheriff's deputies. Forgive formatting, I'm on my phone. I got my first job at an answering service when I was 16 years old and loved it. We answered for about 200 businesses, and there was quite a mix. Same old every day, but different too. I was the baby of the office, and so was usually not alone. And my coworkers protected me from the usual office debauchery. Drugs, sex, booze, but somehow forgot to mention the Titty Man to me. So this came off as a bit of a shock when he did what he did. I've been working there a few weeks and was alone on a Sunday night, answering calls here and there and being bored. The line for a visiting nurse company, home healthcare, hospice, and rehab lights up. I answer to be greeted with a collect call from the local county jail. I accept the call thinking that someone might have an elderly parent they can't reach and need a well check or to schedule extra visits because they got locked up. Nope. I'm greeted with, "How big's your tits?" I promptly hung up. He called back several times, and I have to accept the call in case it really is for the reasons listed above. I contact the on-call nurse. She tells me what I just told you about, and how he does this from time to time. I then proceed to be harassed for half an hour, when I get a brilliant idea. Of course, Titty Man calls back, and I accept the call. I tell him I have to put him on hold, because so I can answer the phone, but I'll talk to him. He likes this. He starts asking questions, dirty ones, and I answer a few, then put him on hold, grab the other headset, and don it. Here is where law enforcement comes into play. I call the bondsman we also answered for and explain my situation. He grabs his other phone and called his buddy inside the jail, relaying the situation. He's having trouble doing this because he's also listening to me talk dirty to this creep. I was very creative for Titty Man, and he ate it up. The bondsman was laughing so hard he was in tears. Since Titty Man was calling from inside the overcrowded jail, they couldn't pinpoint him just by being on a phone. Deputies began shutting down banks of phones one at a time. When the call cut off mid-pervy spew, the officers checked who was on that bank. Lo and behold, there was Titty Man. He was in jail because he was surprised, making obscene and harassing phone calls. Who would thunk it? Deputies took him into custody with new charges, and he got another 18 months or so tacked on to his existing sentence. The idiot was fairly short to the door, too. My story doesn't end here, however. Several years later, I was working at another answering service, and he calls. Same company and everything. I informed the on-call nurse, and they ended up pressing charges on him again. I encountered this creep and his creepy yet hilarious antics at all 3 services for the same company, and different ones as well. It's been 20 years since I first encountered the Titty Man. I no longer do answering service work, but I have a few friends that still do, and the creep is still at it. I hope you got a kick out of my story.